This episode of The Vinyl Guide is sponsored in part by Groove Washer. Clean and protect your records with the best and safest cleaning fluid around, the Groove Washer. Ask your record shop for the Groove Washer or head over to groovewasher.com and get 10% off with discount code VinylGuide10. Protect your vinyl investment with Groove Washer cleaning fluid and supplies from groovewasher.com.
And now, on with the show. Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Hey everyone, Happy New Year. It's Nate. Episode 480 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for vinyl collectors and record nerds. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've all had a very restful break. Hope you had plenty of time with family and friends and spinning records. Hope you had a great time. We're lurching back into the new year, into work, into a regular schedule. So it may be a slow warm-up for many, but today we're firing right outside the gate. 45 years of Adolescents with Tony Reflex. Well, he goes by many names. Tony Brandenburg, Tony Cadena. He's got a lot of different names, but today we talk to Tony of Adolescents. It's an in-depth interview which covers the band's 45-year journey from the early days recording Amoeba through their current status as punk rock legends. We talked to Tony about the influential debut Blue album, their long-lasting relationship with Frontier Records, personal dynamics within the band. Of course, we can't talk Adolescents without talking about the lasting impact of the late bassist Steve Soto. And we also cover their most recent work, Caesar Salad Days, Crop Duster, and also what's next for these legends of Orange County punk. Now, this interview was conducted at the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas in early December. Both Tony and I were giving guided tours on the same day, so it was a great opportunity for us to connect in person, have the interview, and because of this rarity, we had a camera crew present. And we made a video of this interview, which you can enjoy on our Patreon page, patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Head up there now. You get to see the video. You get to help support this show. You get the commercial-free experience and various extras. That's patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Head up there now and check it out. All right, with that, let's kick off 2025 with a conversation with Tony Reflex on 45 years of Adolescents. We're rolling? All right. Got the cameras going. We're here in the Punk Rock Museum with Tony Reflex of the Adolescents, or Tony Brandenburg, Tony Cadena, Tony Montana. Who are you today? Which Tony are you?
I'm Tony today.
You're Tony. Yeah. You're just plain Tony. Okay.
Plain old Tony.
All right, plain Tony. Thank you so much for joining us. My first question is, how distracting is it having someone as attractive as Brad Logan in the band?
Oh, it's very distracting.
I would imagine, yes. I can't take my eyes off him.
He's fun to watch, too, and I get the best shots of him. I get to see the front and the back side.
Oh, wow. That's a privilege most of us don't get. All right, so look, we're coming on 45 years of Adolescents. Is that right?
Yeah.
If I have my math right. And, such a pivotal band, so beloved, even getting new, younger fans these days. What are your overall thoughts about that?
Well, it's nice to see generations. I didn't expect anything like that, and we started getting, well, we've always had young people that came, but then they got older and they were still coming, and then they started bringing their kids. And then they became grandparents, and then some of them started bringing their grandkids. So we get three generations that come to the shows.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing.
At an Adolescents gig, there's people of all ages. Yeah. There's old farts like me, and then there's also there's young kids running around singing Amoeba. And it's just like it's probably part of their musical. While they're in the crib, they're probably hearing those things.
It's where they get they're cutting their teeth.
Yeah. So going back those 45 years, when you think about the records, the things that influenced the sound of Adolescents, especially leading up to that infamous Blue album, what are the sort of records that had a big sway on you and the sound of the band?
Well, I'd say the sound of the band and myself were my big influences, sound-wise, were the Beatles and Cheap Trick. Mm-hmm. They had a lot of harmonies and a lot of a lot of really interesting things going on, and especially when you start getting into the taking the Beatles after like Rubber Soul. You're talking about an amazing album. I'd say the Beatles, and I really liked the Kinks when I was growing up, and used to listen to. When I got into punk rock, it would be bands like the Buzzcocks that were real, that had a big influence, and because they played pop, they had, and if you listen to the Buzzcocks, you can hear the Adolescents, are definitely, an outgrowth of a band like that.
Yeah.
You hear little Beatles things going on, especially in our later records. You'll hear little things that sound like the Beatles, musically.
What were some of the early records you had? Do you remember the first record you brought home?
Oh, golly. Well, the first records that I had were actually children's records. So I got my first one of those little suitcase record players that had a needle that was almost melted into the arm. I was listening to, things like Icka Soda Cracker, which was one of my favorite songs. And Little Golden Records. I don't know if you remember those.
The kids' records, right? With the storybook and the turn the page.
And yellow vinyl. They literally were golden records. Stuff like that. And then after that was cereal box records. And so records used to be, not all records, but they had like the Jackson 5 and Bobby Sherman or the Archies, and these were all on, you'd get a box of cereal, and the record would be like what an acetate was, on the back of the cardboard, and you just cut the record out, and it would play. It would actually play.
Yeah.
And they, like the Monkees, like it had the Monkees theme and Last Train to Clarksville or whatever, and they have like four songs on these little records. It was really cool.
Yeah.
They were really cool.
I remember getting those like from the Count Chocula and stuff like that. So at what point did you, was there a record, was there a band that kind of the penny dropped for you that made you want to be in music?
It was the Beatles, definitely. And my mother had a couple of Beatles albums, and that's where I started, listening to rock and roll records that weren't on the radio. I'd hear like Summer in the City on the radio, which I really loved. They would be like on a compilation that radio stations would put out compilations in the 60s with all the hits of the time period. And she had records like that I used to listen to. So it'd be like an album full of singles, which by the time I was listening to them were already oldies. And so those were some of my first records, the ones that I got from my mom. Stones record, High Tides in Greengrass, I think it was a collection. And the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, side 1, side 2 was all classical music, so I didn't listen to the side 2, but side 1, which I really liked a lot. So those were my first records. And like I said, the Beatles were the band that got me wanting to play music. I wanted to play baseball, and I was such a horrible baseball player that, it wasn't something that I pursued. But music was something that was easy to pursue because I didn't have to do anything at first. Like I wasn't in a band, so I was just a music fan. And so that was where records would come into play, and the radio, of course.
So was it always vocals you wanted to do, or did you try taking up instruments?
I tried to play bass, but it was like baseball. It was just, as much as I wanted to, I didn't have the ability or the drive to actually learn how to play, even to take the time to learn how to tune something.
Okay.
So
you realized that kind of early on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
vocals is going to be
12, 13. Yeah. By that time, I knew I wasn't going to be able to be in a band unless I was a singer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that was your path very early on.
Right.
Now, if I understand correctly, the first time you were on vinyl record is a Rodney on the Rock compilation. Is that right?
That's right. We did Amoeba, and it was on Rodney on the Rock. And with a lot of other, Black Flag, Agent Orange, a lot of early Los Angeles punk bands.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about getting that opportunity.
Well, gosh, it would be Robbie Fields Posh Boy who had approached us for that one, and I'm not sure how we came to meet him, but he wanted it was through Rodney Bingenheimer.
Yeah.
And he wanted to. He had heard and seen us play Amoeba at the Starwood, and wanted us to record that song for his compilation for Rodney on the Rock. And because we were friends with Rodney, we were happy to, he played us. He was the first person to play our demo tapes and to actually pay attention. We showed up at the studio one day, and he came to the back door, and we gave him a cassette tape and said, "This is our band." And we left, and we got into the car and we're leaving. He was already playing it.
He was on the radio as you guys are driving away.
That was a big deal. Like, okay, this is a big deal. We're being played on the, we're playing on the radio. It was really exciting.
And that song Amoeba, obviously, it's just such a cornerstone song of California punk, and so important to the band. When you were writing that song, the first time, do you recall the first time you became aware we're hearing the melodies or the song of Amoeba?
Well, I didn't write that one. It was Casey and Rik. But the first time I actually heard a variation of it was I saw Social Distortion play, and there was I believe they played it that night. There was a band called the Detours. And the Detours had Rik and Casey in the band, and Amoeba was on there. Was actually a few of the songs on the Blue album were Detours songs. And when those guys joined the Adolescents, they joined the Adolescents about a year after the band. We were a band. Right. They joined, and they brought a bunch of songs with them, and one of them was Amoeba.
Right.
And No Way, Creatures. Those all came with from Rik and Casey out of the Detours catalog.
Yeah, and from a very early point, did you recognize that there's something special about this song?
Yeah, right away. It was catchy, silly, sing along. It was real clear. Like, this is kind of a good song.
Crowds are singing along with it. It's very easy to.
Easy to jump in.
If you've never heard the song before, by the second verse, you're already singing along.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed that even to this day, someone will, say, "I've never seen you before, but that song is so catchy."
Yeah.
So
the Rodney on the Rock compilation was on Posh Boy.
Right.
Before the band went to Frontier, were there any other labels, Posh Boy or any other labels that you guys were talking to about getting involved with?
Well, no, we were. We had a couple of demo tapes, but we didn't even think that a demo tape would get you signed to a record deal. Like, that wasn't, in our. We were planning on just handing out cassettes to our friends and hopefully getting played on the radio, which we did.
Yeah.
But we didn't expect it to go much further than that. And so when Lisa approached us, we had just got done playing a couple of big parties in Garden Grove that turned into riots, and she approached us around that time because the band was exploding. Like, we would play live, and we'd play a party, and there would be 300 people that would show up to a house party, and it would turn into a punks versus hippies type of, they called them hippies. They weren't hippies. They were just guys with long hair that were rockers or bullies or whatever the hell they were. It would turn into brawls. So we had to stop playing parties. That was the end of parties for us.
You guys were playing these big parties and turning into riots and brawls and everything. And Lisa said, "I want to be in that business."
Yeah, I want this is a good band. This is a good band to sign. So Lisa approached us to do an album, and she set it all. Again, we didn't know what we were doing. She set up a studio, set us up with a real engineer. He knew what he was doing, Tom Wilson.
Yeah.
And he knew what he was doing, and we went in to record this. He had a basketball court in his studio, and it was really, it was set up for recreation in between, recording or whatever. Well, I went in, I hated sports so much. I went in, and when I saw the basketball court, I took out a fire extinguisher and sprayed it all over the court. It was an indoor court, and half court. And I sprayed that all over, and that was how Tom met me. So he wanted to get me and my parts done as quickly as possible and get me out of there.
How long did it take to record the Blue album? Just the weekend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did it over a weekend.
All right, and the album cover. I mean, again, very iconic. That color blue is very unique to the Adolescents album. talk to me about the design. Who came up with that? And
Well, I asked Lisa, to make a record our record to look like the Cheap Trick logo. I wanted something that looked like Cheap Trick.
Okay.
So I wanted, like type font and,
Right.
and I said, I don't even know if I had suggested red and blue, but my favorite color is purple. And so the single that we put out was the writing was in purple.
Right.
And so I think that, the red and blue combination were my favorite colors, but it was Diane who actually laid that out and, came up with that graphic and the whole thing.
Okay.
She was an artist that worked with Lisa and Pomp and Frontier.
Okay. Were you guys involved pretty much every step of the way, or was that?
Not really on the cover work. Like I said, I gave them something very vague and blank. Didn't say really what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
She really was the one who laid that all out: the back cover, the front cover, the whole thing.
The insert.
The insert. I don't know who did the insert. I did it. I wrote out or typed out all the lyrics and wrote them out and gave them to them, and they was put onto the insert. But I provided the lyrics, but I didn't provide the layout or any of that stuff.
Okay. All right. So at some point, Lisa shows up with a box full of records for you guys, passes you out a few. Do you remember that moment?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No. I would imagine that I wasn't receptive or I was being punk rock and contrary. So I don't know, but I know me back then. That's very possible.
Okay.
But yeah, she did. She gave us a few records, but I don't remember the exchange or any of the other part.
Because around that time, correct me if I'm wrong, but the band wasn't in the healthiest state at that time.
No, we were young and experimenting with a lot of things, and and those things created a lot of schism, so we weren't in I would call a bad state. I don't think anybody was addicted to any drugs or anything like that, but the drugs created a behavior that was not good for getting along together, because we didn't hang out. We weren't friends. I mean, I was friends with Steve. Steve was real good friends with Frank, so I was friends with Frank through Steve. Rik and Casey I wasn't really friends with. They were, they're a little bit older than us. They came from a different band. I enjoyed their company and I liked them, but we weren't friends. We didn't hang out and stuff.
There's a marriage of convenience, I guess. Right. Okay.
We're a band, a band of guys that were from the same area, that kind of mixed, knew each other's music and kind of mixed in together to try something new out.
Yeah, and I would imagine no one at that stage really had any visions of where this band could go. It was just another band. They were probably already everyone's starting to get interested in other projects as well.
Right. And Rik was starting to play in Christian Death, so he had another band going on. Casey had started DI, so he was starting his new band. And the Adolescents were all I was really, really interested in doing. I started a new band after the Adolescents first breakup. I started a band called The Abandoned, but that was a few years after the Adolescents record. It was 3 years later or something.
So before that happened, there was a single, an Adolescents single, Welcome to Reality. Talk to me a little bit about that. Were there visions of a second album?
Yes.
Okay.
And what became Rick's solo album was All By Myself by Rick Agnew. Was some of the songs that were about 3 of those songs the Adolescents had already started to learn and started to play. And Casey's song that ended up with the first DI record, Richard Hung Himself, was also on the Adolescent set list.
Right.
I had a whole different set of lyrics for that song. So
those were kind of the bones of what was envisioned originally to be a second Adolescents.
Oh, it would have been an amazing record if it had been made.
Right. Okay. Was there any discussion about that happening at all? Was there?
No, because there was a blowout between Rik and myself, and which ended with him leaving the band, actually being thrown out of the band for that particular time, because we had a show. And he had gotten upset and thrown his guitar and walked off stage and left us there. So we're, again, this isn't somebody who was my friend. What he did was he left me hanging in the middle of a set. So I was pissed. And I riled everybody up and said, well, we need to do something about this problem. Why don't we get Pat Smear to play guitar instead?
Right.
And so we all decided, we want Pat to play. Rick's going to go.
Okay. Now, Pat played with the band between the first album and the single?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
And then when the single came out, we had Casey's roommate, who was also named Steve, played second guitar on that.
Right.
And, Rick was on the cover of that 45, but he was Frank's brother, so he was there.
Mm-hmm.
He was there to support the band and to support his brother's band. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't in the band anymore at that point in time.
Talk to me a little bit about that picture of the cover of the single. It's around a gravestone, yeah?
Yeah. The Ed Culver had told us, he's the photographer on that single, had told us that he had an idea to do a picture shoot, and he said there's an abandoned graveyard called Spadra. And he said, there's nobody there. We can go on to it and we can shoot pictures there. And so we did. We went there. We found a stone that we could all fit around and sat and stood, around this gravestone. No idea who the person was. And, we thank you, whoever you are. But I don't. The Spadra's been closed off since then because people were going in and doing doing damage and stuff like that. So they fenced the area up. But it's just an old cemetery that was in like the Pomona area.
Right. Okay. The first album, was there ever a title considered for that debut album?
No.
Okay.
No.
Nothing. It was always just going to be Adolescents.
Yeah. No, somebody had suggested we call it Amoeba, but we said, it should just be called Adolescents. It should just be our band name. And that's it.
Okay. So outside of that first album and the single, were there any other recordings of the band that may not have surfaced at that time?
There were not of that lineup. There was some earlier stuff that we had, and there were demos, but we didn't do any recording or anything in between the two records. There was nothing out there.
Okay.
There's
none of the Pat Smear sessions were recorded. Not even demos or anything like that.
Nothing.
No? Okay.
No. And he played with us for about three months. It was a short period of time. We wanted to tour. We were working on setting up our first tour, and he couldn't do the tour. And so he stepped down at that point.
Okay. Now, I believe there's a recent reissue of the Rob Ritter tapes. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about the story of those?
Hey there, audiophiles. If you're seeking stylish furniture to showcase your stereo and record collection, well, look no further than SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop designs extraordinarily elegant record cabinets and consoles that add sophistication and panache to your music hobby. Handcrafted in the good old USA in the vinyl-loving city of Portland, Oregon, Sidetracked Workshop's designs are a music lover's dream. Made with real walnut veneered wood and brass accents, these gorgeous designs add class and taste to the record room and ship fully assembled and ready to enjoy. Just check out the designs for yourself at SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on records. Don't keep them in a crate, and don't risk your records on those feeble wooden pegs from IKEA. Your music deserves the dignity of Sidetracked Workshop. That's SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Elegant solutions for the vinyl lifestyle. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
Now, I believe there was a recent reissue of the Rob Ritter tapes. Can you talk to us a little bit about the story of those?
Sure. It's not a reissue. It's actually that stuff's never been put out. I found during the pandemic, I was going through my closet, and I found a box of tapes. And in the box of tapes was a tape that I got from Rob Ritter. And Rob Ritter was a friend of mine. In 1985, he gave me a cassette tape of 2 shows from the Starwood, one on each side. And the sets were about 35 minutes long, each one. And one was a board tape. Means it was recorded off of the soundboard, and then the other one was recorded from inside as part of the audience.
Right.
And he was the one who recorded that stuff and gave that to me. So he's passed away. He was in the Gun Club at the time that he passed away. He was a bass player of the Bags, and was in the Gun Club. Played in 45 Grave. He was a really great bass player, really great musician, and all around really cool guy. But he and I were sitting on a curb talking, and he said, "I have this tape for you, of some shows. Would you like it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to have that." And so, like I said, I sat on it and didn't know I even had it until the pandemic hit. And then when I was doing some deep cleaning, I found it in
Oh, so you'd had it in a box for decades or something like that? Okay.
Yeah, and as soon as I realized, I played it and realized what it was, I took it over to have it put digital. I got digitized.
Yeah. Well, you preserved. I mean, those cassettes, they start to break down after a while. So okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now there were some other Adolescents live shows that I think Rob Ritter taped that were released quite some time ago. So these are totally different than I think Adolescents 81 to 86 and a few others like that.
Yeah, they're different. The 81, 86, I think there was just a couple of songs, and I don't know where they came from. And then most of that record was stuff that was recorded in 86.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't live in Los Angeles, but I've been in LA enough to know that there seems to be these kind of barriers of travel. Like people up north in Hollywood, when I say I'm going to the Orange County, they're like, "Oh, that's far." Right. It seems to be. I live in Australia. That's just a
everything's
jump.
far.
Everything's far. So Hollywood to Orange County is nothing, right? But there seems to be barriers even now. Back in the day, you guys were playing in Orange County. Was it difficult to kind of break up into the Hollywood scene? Was there any of those sort of barriers?
No, the people in the old Hollywood punks had seen, a lot of them had seen us before. Rob was part of that, that generation, and they were really, really accepting. I think they thought we were cute, like these little kids out there playing this music. But they were real receptive. And, we had a lot, but they weren't going to drive out to Orange County to see us. So, we were going into Hollywood to play. And in downtown, we played the Vex Club, which was in East LA. We played there quite often. And the Starwood, the Whiskey, we played those clubs as well.
Was it kind of a weekly thing? You guys were doing shows each week? Or?
Yeah, we were playing a lot. We'd have, 2-3 shows in a month. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then they would come down and play Cuckoo's Nest and a few others like that. Okay.
Right.
So it's a pretty supportive community, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Black Flag had come out, a few times to play at the Cuckoo. The Cuckoo's Nest wasn't really popular with people. The audience didn't appreciate the club. The other bands didn't appreciate the club. We weren't getting paid very well. The Adolescents would headline and, pack that club out. They'd sell a lot of beer. They'd, get a door, and we would get like $25, $50. And, $5, so we'd split up everybody gets $5, which doesn't really,
Right.
It was... it wasn't even a nice gesture. It was just just a little, pittance.
Yeah.
So a lot of unless you were in a band that wasn't used to being paid, and we were in a band that wasn't used to being paid, it seemed normal.
Yeah.
Like normal behavior.
Did you guys sell any merch on the road? Did you bring any records or anything like that to sell?
No. Well, the first tour was in 86 or 87. And we did bring shirts on that tour, but I think we made like 3 or 4 dozen. Like it wasn't nearly enough. We had no idea. We were throwing darts, with our eyes closed.
So that was 86, Brats and Battalions.
Right.
Now that was, as I understand, the band reformed for a reunion.
Right.
And then decided on that, let's record some more stuff. What was the reason for that reunion? Do you recall? It's at Fender's Ballroom, I think.
People had just been asking for a while. It got to the point where we couldn't really fight it anymore. It was just starting to get like, oh God, people really want us to play. We're not going to be able to shake this thing off. So we got together and started rehearsing and did a couple of shows. And one of them was at Fender's, which was with the Weirdos, who were, big favorite of mine. And we played with the Weirdos, and I think Rick Elric played. It was a great show. Subterfuge played from up here. So, yeah.
Okay. So off the back of that, the band said, okay, let's do some more recordings.
Right.
You record Brats and Battalions. Was there ever any discussion about putting that on Frontier? I think that was on SOS Records.
It was on SOS. No, because the guy that was managing us, who was the ex-singer of the Detours, started a label called SOS. So we decided to put it on there. I don't even think anybody had talked to Lisa about releasing it.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to put it on Frontier, but if it had been on Frontier, we'd still have the rights to the record. So
okay, so that's lost somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, which may be why you re-record some of it for Caesar Salad Days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not trying to sell the records for somebody that's hasn't paid me. So
right.
And I had an argument with a couple of the people, the lawyer the lawyer's office about it, because I didn't think that they had any business putting it out. Apparently they had bought it from XXX, so they did have business putting it out, but I wasn't going to support it.
Right. Okay. And you've been on Frontier for 45 years now.
Yeah.
Still working with Lisa. That sounds like it's been a great relationship.
Yeah. We've remained friends over all these years. Yeah, and it has been a great relationship.
Any idea how many copies that first album has sold?
No, I have no idea. I always say 10,000.
I think you're off by a few decimals.
It's sold 10,000.
That must be out of, again, I don't think anyone was keeping track of the dates. Right. And it's so even to this day, people are still loving it. So.
Yeah. And the earlier days, they didn't keep track like that, on numbers, especially for a do-it-yourself kind of label. They weren't tracking that information. And before barcodes, they had no real record keeping for it, except what they might ship and not get back in returns.
Right. So. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about Steve. You and Steve Soto had a very close relationship, partnership within Adolescents and a friendship.
Yeah.
For people who may not be familiar with Steve, can you talk to us a little bit about share with us about him as a person?
Steve was a really funny guy. That's had amazing stories that he would tell, and I wish he was here so he could tell them to me again, because I always forget. But he was a really dear man, and a good friend, and I miss him. It's hard for me to talk a lot about him, but I do. We became friends when we were 16, and that friendship lasted until he passed away. And whenever there, like I said, I had falling out with different members of the band, but never Steve. Steve and I, even when I wasn't playing in the band, he and I were still close.
Okay.
So,
yeah, he seems like your brother in this whole adventure.
We called ourselves Rock Wives because we was always one and the other was there. Other Rock Wives, we'd laugh and we'd say Rock Wives are like, Mike and Kim of Channel 3 or Stan and Leonard of the Dickies. They're like, they've played together forever and they'll always play together. And we called ourselves Rock Wives.
Yeah.
So.
And after he passed in 2018, and the album that came out afterward, Russian Spider Dump, I think featured a song with him on it.
Yeah.
Was that from an older recording? That was
yeah.
What was? Well, obviously it's from an older recording, but was that a demo? You know?
We were starting to record. I Got a Line on You by Spirit, the Spirit song, and we had just put his guitars. He had put the guitar tracks down, and we decided not to put a cover song on the record, so we didn't finish working on it.
Okay.
Then when we did an album of all covers, I said, we could take this song that Steve's done all the guitar stuff on, and we can put on this record. That would be really, really cool and be a great way to keep Steve's name here and keep him involved in the band that he started. So, that was where that came from. But it was like I would call it an unfinished song up until that point.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful, touching track, and it's nice to see him on the credits. So I always wanted the history of that. And Caesar Salad Days, this is an album re-recordings of a lot of the hits or non-hits of Adolescents.
Right. Yeah, they came because we'd done most of our shows over in Europe. We were recording our albums and putting them out just in Europe. So we had all these great songs that people couldn't, either could only buy as an import or they couldn't get them at all. Like there were things that were out of print, like songs from OC Confidential, which were completely out of print. So, or songs like Balboa Fun Zone off an album that I wasn't on, but a song that I really liked, one of Steve's songs that I really, really liked. So we put that on. But that particular song was done with Steve. The other stuff that we did was all with the current band.
Yeah, and Caesar Salad Days, back on Frontier.
Right.
So it's kind of, everything's gone full circle.
Right. Yeah, this is our third record. We did La Vendetta with a European label, but it was put out in America by Lisa. So yeah, we've stayed busy and stayed together. And we do another record. I expect we'll do the same thing.
Okay. Well, that sounds hopeful. So
yeah.
Looking forward, is there another Adolescents record in you?
I've got all the demo songs from everyone. It's just a matter for everyone to sit down and learn the songs and record them.
All right. Absolutely look forward to that, because the most recent albums, Crop Duster, Russian Spider Dump, Caesar Salad Days, are fantastic listens.
Thank you.
Sonically, they sound phenomenal, and it was nice to see you back on Frontier. So hopefully that'll continue. So here on the show, and I know you've been talking a lot here at the Punk Rock Museum giving tours. So before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about record collecting. Okay. You're a bit of a record collector, I understand? I
really collect CDs more than records. So,
This interview's over. Sorry. No.
But I do collect records, and I've got about a couple thousand records.
Okay.
And so, I probably got about 5,000 or 6,000 CDs. So it's, it shows you that I leaned more towards CDs because I kept having trouble with my record players and moving from one place to another. It was easier to move, with a box, a CD, for a CD box. Kind of a box player than it was to carry around a whole big, huge
moving
stereo.
records is a pain in the ass.
Right.
I totally get it. And keeping the receivers going. And, oh, God, I need another needle and that sort of thing.
Right.
I get it.
I have a 78 player, which I really like to listen to Caruso records on, but,
Yeah?
yeah.
Seriously.
I do
Enrique
have
Caruso's wonderful.
yeah. And so I do have my old 78 player, and I still, and I used to listen to 78 records when they were little golden records. So it was kind of a full circle for me when I got my first 78 player. So I've got an old 78
Can
player.
you do an Enrico Caruso impersonation?
Oh, not even a chance. Not
sure?
a chance,
okay.
yeah.
All right. Fair enough. So if you look at your record collection, all the different records you have, what do you think are one or two of the most precious ones? And it doesn't need to be the most valuable, but maybe something that means a lot to you emotionally, that was from a time that was important.
Well, I really like my Danger House singles a lot. And, those, and they put, Lisa collected those on an album, those, the Danger House, she put a couple CDs out, which was an amazing collection of the 45s. But the Danger House records, I really meant a lot to me. And the first Germ single, the Forming single, I have a copy of that a friend gave to me back then, and I've always kept it.
Right.
I've been offered like $500 for it. It's without the cover. Offered $500 for it, and it's not. I mean, I could always use $500, but it's not like it's something that I want to let go even for $500.
Is it, so not to get too nerdy, is it the true mono one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that is, yeah.
Yeah. The record was given to me by a friend, and she was telling me that they used to put the 45s on her car on the antenna of her radio antenna on the car, and like flip them off the car as they were driving by, or toss them or whatever. Like when you think about the value of those records now, they were just flinging them and playing games with them and stuff. So
well, as I understand, they weren't happy with the true mono one, so they just decided to throw them around and destroy them.
Yeah.
And the ones that survived to this day were scooped up at some show that they were throwing them out in the crowd. So you got yours in that environment. Yeah, that's an absolute gem there. Yeah. Did you have many experiences with Germs?
Yeah, they were my favorite band. So I used to go and see them, starting in 1979 and until the last show. In the end of 1980. So I saw them a few times there, about 4 or 5 times. And then later on, when they did What We Do a Secret movie, they reformed and had Shane West sing. And we played with the Adolescents, played with them a couple of times, and then we toured in Spain with them. So we have a history, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any crazy Darby crash stories?
No, not really crazy ones. Just he would always ask people, you got a beer, and right. Once we were at a liquor store, and I had money and I wanted to get a beer, so I asked him if he'd buy me a beer.
Okay.
He was 21, so he could, and so he bought me a beer. So that's my Darby crash story.
I'm sure a lot of people have beer Darby crash stories, but yeah. That's amazing. Okay, well, look, Tony, thank you so much for joining us here, and I'm so glad we finally got synced up to be able to make this happen.
Yeah, really. It's been a while.
Next time when you guys have something coming up, let's do this again. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear all about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful dude. And so glad we were able to make time to connect. We've always talked and threatened to get on one another's calendars, and we finally were able to make that happen. Thanks to the crew at the Punk Rock Museum for helping make this happen. And again, another reminder, there is a video of this interview up, patreon.com/vinyl guide. Head up there now and please enjoy. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, huge thanks to everyone who is sharing these episodes on social media, putting them in Reddit forums and Facebook groups, leaving us positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That is hugely appreciated. Please keep it up, and we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.